let's have a good debate. We have here quite an eminent panel, which I'm proud to be sitting with. I will introduce them right from the end. We have Ostalos right there, we have Maureen, we have Acie, we have Memory, and we have Walter. We will get through it, we will get into more of their bios as they take the stand to speak. So first of all, we are going to start with Maureen Kademaunga. Maureen is a national coordinator of the She Vote 2018 campaign. She's a human rights activist and also represents the Institute for Democratic Alternative for Zimbabwe. Maureen Kademaunga is a Doctor of Philosophy student at the University of Pretoria. She holds a Master of Science degree in Political Science from the University of Amsterdam and BSc Honours degree in Sociology from the University of Zimbabwe. Her field of study is international relations and transnational governance. Please help me welcome Maureen Kademaunga.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tendai. Thanks for the introduction. I think, simply put, I'm a political science student, anthropology student, and also a resident of Zimbabwe. The topic today is focused on the youth and the election, the upcoming election.
You're welcome.
What's going on?
I'm so sorry.
On the youth and the election in Zimbabwe, the generational question. I think for me, at the center of the economic, because when you talk to young people a lot of times and you ask about the generational question, they will respond and tell you about their unemployment. They will tell you that they are living in abject poverty. They will tell you about the lack of democratic freedoms, freedom of assembly, freedom of choice, etc. And what has been lacking for me is the understanding of the root cause of all these problems that they speak about every day. And I think at the center of our economic problems is the thorny issue of bad governance, pre-independence and post-independence. When Mbuya Nehanda, Chabinuka and others were agitating and organizing their lords to resist, it was to resist a colonial government that had excluded our people from the economic, or from the economics of the country, from the political arrangement of the country. So we had the first Chimurenga. And then we moved into the second Chimurenga, where we have, your Tongo Garas, your Maimujurus and them, who fought against the colonial government. But the central issue was never really just the colonial government, but the effects of the colonial government, which meant that our people are excluded from the economy, our people are excluded from decision-making, etc., and the women continue to be peripheral. Post-independence, in 1980, when our people elected a government that was elected through a seemingly democratic process, it was almost a new dawn. But less than 5 years after they assumed power, this government started butchering people in Matabeleland. I must say at this point, because I think it is, a citizen duty for me to tell, like, at this point, we had people who are in this government who were pioneering the butchering of people in Matabeleland for political expedience, less than 5 years after independence. And then barely 10 years after independence, neocolonialism took a center stage. And we had our government starting to embrace very exclusive economic models that facilitated for the avarice of the affluent, who were just seeking to expand their holding at the expense of the impoverished. And at every turn, as I told the history of our country, pre-independence, we had the generations of that time, the young people of that time, the Buyaneanders, the Kaguvis, agitating and organizing their lords to resist in the first Chimurenga. The second Chimurenga was also organized by young people in the 70s. 1963, ZANU-PF was founded, launched, and then you had, the Joshua Nkomos, the Robert Mugabes, Nikita Mangenas of that time, starting to organize people and starting the armed resistance against colonial rule. That was a generational arrangement, generational response to a crisis of that time, which was a crisis of governance in terms of, colonial rule. They won the war, they came in, they started. And when they started governing, like I said, 10 years later, they embraced neocolonialism. The effects of neocolonialism were felt by our parents, by people at that time. Chigumuro, if you understand, the government wanted a leaner structure, a lot of people lost their jobs. Things became very difficult for the generality of Zimbabweans. In the mid-90s to the late 90s, people started to organize themselves through the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, that's the labor, women's movement, the students' movement, the NCA, the National Constitutional Assembly. It was a generational response to a question of that day. They started to organize from the Bazi townships of Mbare right to the last hut in Mzarabani. People were educated about what was going on, about the neocolonialism agenda that had taken the center stage and how it was robbing our people of their livelihoods. And out of that, the birth of the MDC in 1999 was witnessed by Zimbabweans. And I think at that point, that's when we started to see the third Chimurenga. Not the third Chimurenga in the terms of, evading farms and butchering white people on a very racial political scheme. For me, the third Chimurenga started with the MDC as they started to question the exclusionary economic model and as they started to question, the neoliberal agenda. And from then, we've seen this third Chimurenga evolve. So when I saw the topic, which says youths and the generational question, I asked myself, what is the generational question? And for me, the generational question really is to complete the change that started pre-independence with the Mbuyaneanders in the 1890s, when they spoke about resistance against a white minority rule. And this is the question that we continue to grapple with. Because for me, the main source of our problems as we live our daily lives, our daily struggles, we are unemployed, the majority of us as young people, our productive years are being wasted away, etc., etc. But the source of that is bad governance, which started pre-colonial. And we trusted a government that came in 1980 that they would deliver the change that we wanted. But that change is not here yet. After the agitation and the organization of the MDC and other, pro-democratic forces, by 2009, 2010, going into the current politics, we thought we had moved a step further. But in 2017 November, we saw the takeover, the military takeover by the military and incorporating some civilian elements, Emerson Mnangagwa and others being fronted as the face of the military operation to take over the country. Things have not been the same since then. We marched in our numbers. Everyone has to be associated with it because it resonated with our agenda that Mugabe must go. People forgot that the Mugabe that we were calling for to go was not Mugabe the person, but Mugabe the system. So these people took Mugabe out, and Mugabe the system, Mugabeism, continues today. So for me, the generational question is to complete the change by taking out what we put in 1980 under the premise of putting democracy. It's a dictatorship. It's continuing to date. So going forward, what we need to do is to to make sure that we deal with that governance question. In that sense, then we'll be able to deal with the economic question and the social question. The fact that we are isolated from the family of nations at this point emanates from a governance crisis. We've had a government that is selfish, a government that believes that it must do whatever it takes to stay in power. And I think for us as young people, the majority of us at this point are unemployed. And every day we've had to endure the curse and criticism of those who are eating on behalf of us to say that we lack agency and will and ambition, which is not the case. Because we are not, the thing is, we are not there in parliament, we are not there in government, we're just a generation that is sidelined, if you want. What's going on? Really? Already? Okay, so maybe if I can just quickly say, so for me, the generational question is to complete the change. And how do we complete this change? We're going towards an election in 2018. We have a militarized regime in power. The first thing is that we have to be bold as young people and call it out for what it is. It is an undemocratic and illegitimate regime that took power through military means. The military at the gun is leading politics. So we need to reverse that through an election that is credible, an election that is free. And how do we do that? We need to start to agitate and organize our lot as young people and make sure that we demand for a credible election where we have the security of the voter, security of the vote, and security of the voted. Outside that, we will not be able to complete the change. Number two, I think that as young people, we need to start to take positions of authority. We need to make sure that we run as councillors, we run as members of parliament. Unfortunately, we can't run for Senate because it's 40 plus years. We can't run for presidency. But where we can, we must occupy spaces. I gave examples of Crisis Coalition. I spoke about the NCA and other people who organized in the 1990s. Right now, what we see is young people who are full of rhetoric, but who never go to the ground to organize. We need to start to move out of our comfort zones, go out there, speak to the people, educate them, and tell them what we have, the task we have at hand, so that we can achieve it. Sorry, I'm just finishing off. The last thing, yes, because you're actually distracting. So we need that, and we need to occupy spaces. I always say to people, you know what? If you are not around the dinner table, then you're on the menu. And for a long time, we've witnessed that young people are not on the dinner table. So it means we're on the menu. We're the ones we are the ones who have their productive years being put to waste. So for me, that is the second of the important thing that we need to do to take up space. Number three, we need to shape the political agenda of this election. What is it about? Every political party that is running in this election must feel like they're doing nothing if they do not speak to the issues of young people, including issue of employment, economic inclusion, political recognition. Lastly, I want to say that when the coup in November, and I think it's a coup, when the coup in November 2017 happened, it really remasculinized the way the space for us as young women and as women. We had tankers, we had soldiers being deployed onto the streets, predominantly male, and the people who were calling for this coup from Mugabe to go were predominantly male. There are no female heroes or heroines who came out of that coup. So the narrative is male, and now it looks like politics is a space, or public space is a place for men who are daring, who have the monopoly of violence. Number two, yes, sorry, I mean on this issue. All right, number two on this issue. In as much as over the years, 37 years, these people had, misgovernance and everything. They chose to pick one woman, Grace Mugabe, as the protagonist. They said it's her problem. They blamed everything on her. And the narrative that comes out of that is that women must not be in public place without shame. So it means that all the gains of Beijing and every other process that women have been involved in as a struggle to emancipate themselves have been summarily rolled back. Where we are right now is to start to redefine the space that women find themselves in. So for us, it's very unfortunate that November 2017 happened. And going forward, we need to start to speak out to issues of, women in leadership, women in public spaces. I mean, for example, I have an example of 2 days ago where my brother here, Acie, was, accusing one woman of being, without a boyfriend and therefore not worthy to be in a public space. Those things need to be revised. Those things need to be talked about. And it also...
Me or let us. Which one is it?
All right. So for me, I think generally... So I think generally, as an ending point, for me, the question is that we need to complete the change for gender empowerment, for the democracy and the emancipation of young people in this country. I thank you. How do you give me 3 minutes?
Thank you, Maureen. The history and political landscape of Zimbabwe, well documented there. And she says we need to complete the revolution that began way back then. And also the question being asked is, do women have a space in leadership? How many women do we have here? Is it the political space that makes it that way, or is it just simply that women are not interested? I think I see just about 3 women in this room. That question, of course, on this panel we are 50-50, but that is a question that we would also like to be answered. In terms of our time, ladies and gentlemen, please, let's recognize our time. It's 5 minutes, 7 minutes maximum. We would like for everyone to be able to make a contribution, and then we would also like to get into the question session. It's our viewers that will suffer if we do not give them enough time. Up next is Advocate Walter Chiwore. He is a registered legal practitioner, notary public and conveyancer, and has wide-ranging experience in all areas of legal practice, with a deliberate bias towards corporate and commercial law practice. He was registered to practice in the courts in 2010. He's a graduate of the University of Zimbabwe, having obtained a Bachelor of Law, LLB honors in 2010. He is currently studying towards being a Certified Financial Analyst Charter Holder with the CFA Institute and towards obtaining an MBA with the University of Science and Technology. He is well versed with various aspects of corporate and company law, intellectual property, international trade and investment law, mining law, foreclosures, debt collection, and insurance law, among other fields of law. Prior to setting up practice, Mr. Chiwore was employed at Gulandebele Commercial Lawyers as a professional assistant since September 2010. Please help me welcome Mr. Walter Chiwore.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Personally, I want to start by congratulating the generation of the modern youth. The main reason why I want to congratulate the modern youth is we are proactive generally. Compared to the generation of youth that was there 5 years ago, we are proactive. There are too many statistics which would justify that averment. You will note the current voter registration pattern, it was at about 54%, about 60% of the voters, my youths. And in the last election, we had about 57.5, 58%. So in essence, that's an increase by youth participation. So on that one, we just have to congratulate the youth. But 60% on its own is not enough, because we have 5.2 million registered voters in Zimbabwe at the moment. But our population is 14 million. And of that 14 million, close to about 8 million, 9 million are youths. So we still have a group of about 3-4 million my youths are SATVA registered. I also want to congratulate the political parties that are on the ground. Some political parties appreciate Zrufana Wetwa, I would want to congratulate my guys from MDC. They've clearly come out and said this is a generational consensus. This time it's time for the young people. So it's up to the young people to take it up. Sadly, with other parties, you haven't seen a clear position. With the PRC, you haven't seen anything. With ZANU-PF, it's even worse, because Youth Chair Wawa, I think, is about what, 67 years old. So clearly, I don't know how they're going to be enunciating the youth narrative. Recently touched on what's the new party, NPF. It still has the same people who are in ZANU-PF, the Sandy Moyos and things like that. I don't know how these people are going to be talking about the youth narrative. The youth narrative should be spoken by us, the young people. You know, there's a lot that still needs to be done. There's a lot that hasn't been done. The sad reality that the modern youth has to take note of is Madara will never give us the opportunity. The reason why they'll never give us the opportunities is and we are trying to fight for political space, we are trying to fight for business space. It essentially means we're trying to take what they have in their houses. We're now trying to take Mariru Mwongwema, we are now trying to take Bonzo Ribambro Mapau, Kutitipe Bonzo Iroro. The modern day youth just has to be told you will not get that on a silver platter. There's been a debate, I think a couple of months ago, after Morgan Tsvangirai passed away, how Nelson Chamisa went and took on leadership. There's a school of thought in Ottawa, you should have waited for Congress, you should have done this, you should have done that. But I'm from the school of thought that that's one example of grabbing an opportunity. Opportunities have to be grabbed, you have to work for an opportunity, but when the opportunity presents itself, grab it with both hands. We should show that we are hungry. Because ukadaomirira kuti ungonzi tichakuisa pachigaro uchaenda pachigaro ipopo kana anoisa pachigaro ipapo aneta nokudya. And history has shown kuti havaneti nokudya vanhu vacho. Once vangopinda ndizvozvo. Right now we have a situation where the current president is there. He got into power in a manner which has not been accepted by a lot of circles. And one question that will be posed is, kana vakapinda nepfuti vanozobva sei? That's a question that everyone has to think and has to actively debate on and has to actively seek solutions on. Because we may risk facing the same problem. That when one comes into power, next time the chance of Philip Sibanda I want to be president. Simply because he has the ammunition, he has the power. So at the end of it all, in all these dynamics, in all these leadership dynamics, in all these political leadership dynamics, what are the youths doing? Where are the youths being placed? The youths are not being placed anyway, because these are power battles. In power battles, you are not placed. You actually fight for your own. I was reading recently where we have a debate that's going on social media, when people were saying, should what's the lady's name, Harar West, who was fighting out Jesima Jomi? Oh yeah, Joanna. There were people who were making a simple debate with why is she challenging Jesima Jomi? Why should she not challenge Jesima Jomi? Why should she? Is it because she's young? It cannot be simply because she's young. She has to, Jesima Jomi apinda akwana. If people don't like her, that's that. But we shouldn't be having a situation where people will tell you that do not be in that position because you're young. You have to be in that position because you're economically active. You cannot tell me that I'm not allowed to fight for a leadership position, but go on to tell me Mangwana I'm the vanguard, I'm the leader of tomorrow. So if I'm the leader of tomorrow, what am I doing today? So I want to congratulate all the youths that are fighting it out, and we just want to encourage them to keep going on. The battle hasn't ended. The battle still has to be fought. The generation of the old Madaras that we have, they came into power very wanawadik. That on its own should be adequate motivation for all the young people. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Advocate Walter Chivore. The question is 2018 elections, youth and the generational question. And he says about 2 to 3 million youth have not yet registered to vote. Are we ready to play our role? Are we ready to make a difference? Are we ready to complete the revolution? Nyaya yekudya ndio iri kuramba ichitaurwa panapa. Are you the one eating or the one being eaten? Choose where you belong. There is a car outside with registration number AEH 3684. The doors are wide open. Would you please attend to your car? On to our next speaker, we have Memory Kadau. Memory Kadau. Memory Pamela is an activist with 12 years experience in development work, human rights, governance, and democracy, development communication, and research. Memory is also passionate and interested in social movement, building equality, music, religion, and culture. A well-rounded lady there. Please help me welcome Memory Kadau.
Thank you, Tendai. I would like to thank, I think, the conveners of this platform, SAPES, and the Young People's Dialogue for creating this space for young people to talk about critical issues related to the development of our nation. When I got an invitation to be part of this panel, and when I got to reflect on the topic, I started to do my research in terms of what I can talk about. I found something very striking and similar in terms of what they say about women and what they say about youths. For example, if you are a woman, especially if you're a young woman, I think you are at the bottom of the food pyramid. They start questioning you about your marital status, your economic status, how you handle yourself in public, how you dress, and the people that have been associated with. And I also found this strikingly similarities in terms of what they are actually saying about the young people. Like Walter, I found what the young people in MDC are doing very encourageable in terms of they have come out and started saying that there is a generational consensus about what we want as young people. So the same things are being said about these young people. Where is the capacity? Who are you? You are being exclusive. You are being a lot of questions. You don't have the capacity and the experience. So for me, it was really striking that there are these similarities and there's an intersection that is there. And I started to think about, I'm a young person, and I associate or would like to introduce myself as a feminist. And recently I've been having a lot of time with young people in rural, mining, and resettlement areas with the Institute for Young Women and Development, where the young people or the young women, the things that are at the center of their hearts are issues to do with service delivery that is gender responsive, issues that just having an economy that is conducive for them to be able to trade, because most of them live on cross-border trading, and the current context is not conducive enough for them to earn a living and support their families. So these are the things that are at the center of their hearts as young people. So I would like to submit, like Maureen, so what is the generational question that as young people we should put forward? I think for me is how do we as a generation evolve and adapt to the changing context and dynamics. Maureen talked about the male domination, the coup. As a young people, how do we adapt that? At the same time, push forward the the transformative agenda of our nation, and carry forward the liberation struggle project for liberation, for economic emancipation, and for, I think, for too many of us, I think it might be different in terms of. Thank you. I think for a number of us, the route is similar, but in terms of our political homes might be different in terms of how we want to take the nation forward. I also looked at the statistics like Walter did, that so where are the young people placed when we talk about the election statistics? Clearly the statistics, if they are saying we are 60% of the people that registers to vote, according to SEC, we are the majority. But as young people, how are we then going to use the power and influence that we have in terms of if we are the majority that have registered to vote? How are we going to use that power in terms of influencing and leading the processes? I also looked at what has been happening generally in terms of how we have been viewed as young people. I think we have been called a lot of names. We have been told that we have nothing to inherit currently. We've been told that we are entitled. We've been told that we are arrogant. We are clueless. We are perpetrators of violence. We are also victims at the same time. The list is endless. But then how do we take the power that we have and the influence that we are yielding at this moment in time? How do we transform that to real change that Maureen was talking about? And I would also want to talk about what has been happening. If you look at the recent cabinet appointments, there was nothing there for the young people. It was almost non-existent, where we have a minister for women and the youth that is over 50 years. And Maureen, I think in front of this house, we might want to submit that we have to come up with a project and challenge the 50 or 40 plus years that you should be a senator, you should be the president. If you are old enough to vote, you are old enough to lead, you are old enough to be in that position. So I think as the young people, these are the issues that we should, I think, in answer to what is the generational question in terms of giving answers to these issues that are confronting us. And I would like to conclude by saying I came up with a speech in terms of just submitting before this audience that what then are our issues as young people. For me, I think it's a change in the governance culture, where the young people are part of nation building and are equal partners instead of seen as soldiers or rally supporters. And also on the economic front, where young people's names are not only names in the revolution, but also names on the payroll, where young people are able to earn a living, where young people can organize or come up with their own businesses that can thrive in economy, where there's improved service delivery that is gender sensitive, that looks at the needs of women in general, and also the creation of an economic environment that is conducive for investors, a better Zimbabwe where education is accessible for all, and health and availability of a social safety nets for the vulnerable and those in need. I rest my case by submitting that I think generally, because we've been asked and being attacked, that it's not only about age. So if I say it's not about age, I will be lying. It is about age. but it's not only about age. It's more than about age in terms of, I think, building a consensus in terms of what we want for the transformation of our country. And also the question, I think the main question is, are we in a position to rise to the occasion as young people? If you want change, I think we have to vote for it. We have to lead. We have to act as young people. Thank you.
Memory, thank you. This may be highly inappropriate, but when she said, is it just about a number thing, Alia's song came into my mind and says, age is nothing but just a number. So, is age nothing but just a number? Should young people be able to be their own presidents? Voting, 2018 elections is a right, but also it's a responsibility that every citizen should take seriously. Every citizen who wants a better life, who wants a better country, who wants a better Zimbabwe. So let's keep that in mind as we go through this dialogue. Our next speaker is Ostalos Siziba. He's a former student leader from University of Zimbabwe. He served in the 2014 to 2015 SRC and graduated and joined the University of Zimbabwe postgraduate department as a master's in international student relations. He also holds a postgraduate certificate from Harvard Kennedy School. Ostalos Siziba is a justice activist and has been involved in social movements and civil society work in Zimbabwe. He's also an organizer with Generational Consensus. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Ostalos. And please do take note, we're beaming live through Sly Media Productions on Facebook. Don't hesitate to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Revolutionary greetings to you all. My name is Comrade. I don't know whether I need this thing. But thank you for giving us this opportunity. I'm somebody who grew up. I'm a peasant from Roho in Caesar, so I'm not very much well vexed with this thing. So you might as well forgive me, courtesy of the state of the economy. So my life is also a reflection of the crisis that we faced as a people. My presentation is going to focus on just 3 issues. Number 1, as I've said, generational consensus. What is this animal? Number 2, the crisis. Number 3, the way forward. So I'm going to try to summarize given the 5 minutes that have been given. And I'm also going to speak about the generational consensus from 2 key issues. Number 1, the ideological persuasion. Number 2, and most important, and obviously the scholarly underpinning of this particular movement. Why do I think this is important? A lot of ink has been spilled on social media, different streams of digital divide around this animal called generational consensus. What is generational consensus? But before I do that, Madam Chair, I want to speak fundamentally to what is a generation, because many people have debate when you say generations, that's why they bring the issue of age. Many people confuse generational consensus with ageism. So I want to speak to what is the definition of a generation. And from my little understanding, a generation are all people living together at a certain particular historic epoch in any society. So, and I believe that with that particular definition, it is something that has informed this thing called generational consensus. What is generational consensus? Generational consensus is a broad movement of young people from different streams of history that have reconvened fundamentally because of one thing. Frantz Fanon, writing in The Wretched of Earth, he says, and I quote, "Each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it." And we as young people from different walks of life, we decided to choose the latter, to fulfill our mission. What is our mission? The National Democratic Revolutionary Project that was started before we were born had 3 clear fundamentals. And at the center of it, I want to submit before this house, it was the fight for one man, one vote. That was the agenda of the National Democratic Revolution. So, but because this thing called the National Democratic Revolution, it was nationalist and democratic in the same process. But we saw, because of what Antonio Gramsci talks about, the revolutionary praxis, we saw the nationalists choosing the first part of that particular project, the nationalist agenda. You have the Mosé Robert Mugabe coming in with the big name political oligopolies, undermining the democratic part of that particular project. So us realizing that it is important as young people at a certain historic epoch to discover our mission and fulfill it. So it's very clear it's a movement for young people, intellectuals, peasants, graduates, unemployed people, doctors, and so forth. But they are informed by a certain ideological persuasion. What is that ideological persuasion? Arthur Mtambara, one of the former student leaders at the University of Zimbabwe, during his time, he wrote, and I quote, "Cognizant of the recent events in Eastern Europe, the Union has agreed to submit itself to Marxism-Leninism, that equates itself to scientific socialism. They agreed fundamentally as a generation." And in Zimbabwe, I want to submit that there were 4 different generations. Number 1, you have the liberation generation. Number 2, you have the ISAP generation. Number 3, you have the renewed nationalist generation that lived during the land reform program. And then you have the ICT or Google generation, as it were. So these are different streams of history. But these are not disconnected in terms of their orientation. But the new generation must be able and be allowed to advance the national democratic revolution agenda. So, and for me, I don't think it's fundamental and of paramount importance to burden the liberation generation to complete the mission whose agenda content they do not understand. So, from that persuasion, we then agree as young people to say, what is our ideological persuasion? Or ideological persuasion to move to the center-left social democracy. And because of that particular ideological persuasion, that we must speak to 3 issues: justice, freedom, and solidarity. So we then identified at this particular historic epoch who identifies with that particular mission. That's why I agreed to endorse Comrade Nelson Chamisa as the preferred presidential candidate in 2018. So that, I think, should be very clear, that our persuasion for the coming in of Nelson Chamisa is not because of his manifesto that is going to happen. It's not because of the transformational project that they're talking about, but it's because of the ideological persuasion that we believe somebody that speaks to these particular issues is very important in terms of taking the country to the new dispensation. And I don't think that people must understand, this is not a new phenomenon. Jonathan Moy, professor, wherever he is, I saw him tweeting, whether from Juba, Mogadishu, or anywhere. He wrote in 2004, and one of his books was titled African Politics, Prospects for New Africa. He was speaking to the need of generational renewal in our society. I don't know whether that informed his G40 agenda. I'm not so sure of that. But the different even scholars, in America in any case, they speak of the generational X, the silent generation, the millennials. These are, so to analyze politics from the lenses of generation does not mean you're excluding a particular generation. But you are taking it upon ourselves to fulfill what Frantz Fanon wrote and spoke to our revolutionary conscience as young people, that we must agree, we must pursue our revolutionary democratic agenda at a certain particular moment in time. And what is the crisis that we are facing as young people? I think Maureen did address in terms of what is the crisis we are facing. The crisis we are facing is political, it's economic, it's social. True. But for me, the most important part is to say we are going through an electrocentric approach to Zimbabwe in question, wherein the majority, according to the provincial statistics released by Justice Chigum, who was recently in Russia, she clearly says it, that the majority of the people who are going to participate in that electoral process are young people. So for me, the most important part is not that young people are going to cast a vote, but the most important part is, are those that want to be voted for going to answer to the question, the livelihood question of that particular generation? Because the disaster is not only those who are going to be elected getting elected properly or improperly, legitimately or otherwise, but it's how they are going to respond to the fundamental questions of young people. Because if you remember, Comrade Che, I want to call you a comrade because for me everyone is a revolutionary. For me, if the current regime or whoever is going to take power and does not become cognizant of that a generational question of young people, which is about livelihood, there's going to be a crisis. If you remember, people who organized themselves in 2016, most of them were young people. Talk of the Evans, talk of all these young people. They were young people. Why? Because people realized that the crisis has reached an apex, so we must organize ourselves. Some of us will reach even stage where we're willing to declare this entire country ungovernable so that we remove Robert Mugabe by any means necessary or unnecessary at that particular time. Why? Because we realize that the political, the economic had penetrated to the personal. So what is the post-electoral disaster? For me, that is the most fundamental question. The post-electoral disaster is wherein those who are going to be elected fail to speak to that. What are we going to find? We're going to find people back into the streets. Why? Because for me, I believe that for this particular election, we must deal with the fundamentals. And what are those fundamentals? That for me fit into the generational question. Number one, restoration of the social contract. Our economy, our society cannot proceed without the restoration of the social contract. What Robert Mugabe did was to capture our nation through fear. The illegitimate processes that brought Robert Mugabe successfully renewing his contracts through electoral processes made him to lose one thing. He never lost power, but he lost confidence. And that is why we're in this kind of economic state. People don't trust this government. People don't trust Dambuzo. People don't trust SBMO and his cabal. So we must deal with the restoration of the social contract, because that's what philosophers tell us. If we visit books of history, they will tell you that society functions in what we call a social contract. So we must deal with that. Number two, we must deal with microeconomic stability in this country. So I believe it's very important for us as a generation. And that's why, as young people, we organize ourselves from an ideological persuasion, because we believe that going forward, our struggle must be how do we then allow ideas to go beyond the politics of names, the politics of big names, individuals, to a dispensation who are able to allow ideas, who are able to allow intellectuals, going to allow different people to contribute to our economy and the new trajectory that our country must take without fear or favor. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, here is the EU agreeing on an ideology. Now, do we have an ideology? Take a moment and pause and ask yourself, what is our vision? What is our mission as young people? Do we have one? Do we agree? No. Can we even agree? Are we going to fulfill or betray our mission? What is the answer going to be? It's completely and totally up to you. Ladies and gentlemen, we introduce our next speaker. His name is Acie Lumumba, businessman and former chairman of Viva Zimbabwe, international political risk consultant, advising multinationals that invest in political and stable countries. Lumumba has worked as a government advisor in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and UK, where he served and led in the British Youth Parliament. Acie is completing his master's in global leadership. Please help me welcome Mr. Acie Lumumba.
Vakanaka kwamuri mese. I think chikuru nchoti mayouth afunge kuti tichadya sei, because nhamo nyaya kana tataura dzese ka nyaya hombe chaicho ndo mayouth arikusagokuti ari kudyira kupi. Allow me to respect and regard Baba Mandaza. Thank you for giving us your home and your offices to use. Allow me to recognize the chairman who's put all of us here together today, Mukoma Kandemiri. Thank you for putting us together. You chair the, I guess, the monopoly of us, chairman. Thank you. I recognize in the audience there's a lot of youth leaders. Mukoma Bishop Shokunze, thank you. I see you, Mukoma Leroy Mufela. I see Cecilia from MDC. I see you, independent candidate, my sister Linda. It's very good to see you, and of course the internet sensation at the moment from Harare West, Joanna Mamombe is here, Agency Gumbo is here. So if I don't call you out, forgive me. I see you, Sabe Mawarire is here. I blocked him on Facebook. But you're welcome. I think my Yimba is here. So anyway, guys, I just want to give some respect and say thank you. I want to acknowledge what my colleagues here have said. Maureen I've known for many years now. Akandifonera mari mozura achititsura futi nenyaya kuti andakati fadzi anofana achiyamwisa vada anga ari majokes agaregere kuyamwisa kwachona inaitamba. I apologized, but Maureen said something very important to me when she called me. She said, Acie, while we may always disagree, while we may not always see things eye to eye, the one thing we must always do is defend each other's right to be able to disagree.
Powerful.
And I found it so powerful, and I told her, but this is the generation where we are today, where while we may disagree, and disagree we do, we must never stop defending each other's right to raise our hands up and say, I would like to say something. My brother Ostalos, you've been very strong, very steadfast in your push for generational consensus. Well done. And again, you have to respect a young person who decides to stand up and say, I will try. Because we get attacked every day. It is a thankless job to be sitting where we are sitting right now. Tino tu kwandati. Unodo wafama mrudi. Kuna nenga chiti. Ya umbere. Kune unongo chifamba murodi. Kweta anotoona unge atokumaka because wakataura opinion yako. And then kuna story nakana opinion ba angokumaka nekuti uonayo. And then kuti anongobvumirana nezvese zvese. And in these differences, you learn how to navigate as a leader, but it is hard.
Yes.
Don't underestimate kuona vanhu vamunoona vachimirana pakamirana chamisa pakaoma. Ndosazibongowa pandoda chihundurani yotongo ndataurawo vanhu ndozvatava kuita. Because democracy yacho zibongowa inonyudza futi. I recognize, of course, my brother, the advocate. I've read a lot of your work. Well done. And my sister, thank you and very good presentation. Here is what I would like to pose as where I think the generational question is. I think what we all saw happen last year is we come from very various upbringings. And I see Mosha. Kwandika kurira inini, nekwakakurira Maureen, kwakati orienta zvakasiyana. Tichikura, tichivapfana stereke politics, Maureen was stubborn MDC. I was stubborn ZANU-PF. Inini ZANU-PF tikanetsana ndikatosvika pakutotukana nemukuru weZANU-PF. Tanetsana yekuona mangangi ekunetsana. But the same happens in MDC. Maureen in MDC akatomuzviko pakuti zvinenge zvisiri kushanda izvi. So as we come from our different upbringings, we have seen conflict at different points. But you realize that as you watch this conflict, tukuriswa hondodzisinekana nesu.
Yes.
Kuzokazonatsofunga apa pandikumonatsoitirei slogan. Unazoona kuitira slogan, it's like, it's almost mashefa ari kuti isusu rega tidyeka tapedza kudya akupa bhiri wosaro chibhadha. And then wombera kuti chef nhasi madya ako vara dumbu riri kukura chef. Chenjera kuputika. And this is where some of us came from. And then some of us came from a background where we were never politically oriented. I don't think we're politically ignorant. I think we're just politically fatigued. We've seen elections all our lives. When you say we're politically ignorant, you make an assumption that we don't know what elections are about, or we don't know what politics is about. We absolutely know what elections are about. You don't go to politics that in Zimbabwe. So what happened last year for me is, as we come from these different divides, student activism, feminism, political party youth leagues, internet politicians, tweet politicians, because now I don't go to politicians who don't Twitter. My keyboard warriors. Ukamuti chitaura pamberi pakwana kuti hamdara ndakatore picture. But as we came from these different divides, what I think happened is we found ourselves as a generation. This generation consensus Ostalos keeps speaking to. We all got there through different paths. We all got to a point, there is not a person in this room who disagrees that young people have to take their position or their placement in politics. None of us disagree. We all got to that position differently. Like my brother Chamisa likes to say, that sometimes wisdom comes with age, but sometimes age comes alone. but tinosvika nguva dzakasiyana siyana pawisdom. Vamwe tinotungamira ndosaka tinzana papa notoita kurumidza kutanga kuenda vamwe vachiteera but tinosvika chikuru kuita sei kusvika tinozosvika. As we got to this place last year, kune vakatanga kuti Mugabe anofanira kuenda vakamira mupark by the name of Itai Dzamara. Ari one. And we all watched Itai Dzamara and said, ameno zviri kuitika kupark uku. Mwana wevanhu akasvika pakutoitwa yaka tikashaya kuti akaenda kupi. But we watched one of us ari mupark meya tikataza ameno hanzi Itai Dzamara aenda. And then we all watched a pastor get on his video and speak. We all watched Linda, my sister, who spent more time in prison than Morgan Twagira spent in prison. That was her path. We also, the different activities or efforts that were taking place, we eventually all caught up to the wisdom that this thing that was taking place needed to be broken. And that's why we all came out on the street, and that's why we all marched. And we succeeded. We give ourselves a hard time, like but the very fact that we did that, nobody else can take credit of that march except young people of this country. They were the ones on the street. Hang on, I'm getting there. But we did that. Not what did we benefit. We did that. So, zvakatunza from tsinga dzakasiyana kusvika pakuti taachinhu taaroko rwabuda taachisa mama tiri paroad. But inonetsa chisa mama mind yekuti tichiri zvigunhu zvakasiyana siyana. So we're now all in the same place. As you can see, we're now all at the same place where we say the generation must now move and must now traject us going forward. But the trouble with being at this place where we all are is we are now differing on so how do we do that. We don't disagree with what must be done. We're disagreeing on how it should be done. And therein, my friends, lie the question. Therein, Ostalos, lies the question of your leadership test. That can you build more bridges than you can destroy? As young politicians, are we in the habit of fighting on behalf of MDC and fighting on behalf of ZANU-PF instead of fighting for each other? It's almost as if ndinoita shungu so kana nda kudefenda mnangagwa but ndikaona mwana umwe mu youth antombodeka na ancharombodaka na kuteerera. We can't defend each other. It's almost as if it's a crime to celebrate munhu MDC. I am a ZANU-PF member, but that doesn't mean I belong to a homogeneous entity where we all think the same thing. And you know angu my idea idi ndo my idea angu ofuti. No, ndinonedza ngopfungwa dzondononge jeti rakarowa pandege papeka pakarowa mari apanetse kuona kabunza pakarowa mari ka khoda urona pakarowa mari panapa pa building ya Dr. Mandaza pakanzi akumamba dawo kwa building ya Dr. Mandaza murungano uya orowa mari mbara anosiya vaka building mumtemano uya orowa mari osiya basaga esimenti. So when you come to Vakumusha, Pura Aparo Barab. No Jetagaroba is Babe. Fire no Bagaro, Maria Jaibo. My point being, the question we must answer is what must we do in this room to get to a point where Joanna can be a candidate in Harare West? But I shouldn't have to hate you, Joanna. And I don't. I support her. I don't hate Linda. I support Linda. I don't hate Maureen. I don't hate Ostalos. I support them. Can it be okay that we can differ as a generation but still support each other? Can it be okay that we can tisata manya kunyadze madhara andiziye kunoswera madhara yani andomboziye kwanoswera zvanoswera vachibata but kana zvakunzi nhasi kune rally toy toy ndofana kunomira nepamberi petoy toy kuti madhara akudya komana ngati mboitira toy toy. Say we have the numbers on our side. This conversation has been going on for years. The numbers are on our side. A group of young people, many years back, those who are more scholastic than I am will be able to tell you the years, gathered together from the same different parts of the country, began to whisper it to each other. They began to say, hey, inzoeka comrade. They were not talking about the past, which is what we seem to be obsessed with. Because Lumumba ndakambonzora akaba mari, Lumumba ndakambonzora ane mukadzi akadii, Lumumba ndakambonzora ane hombe uya ane diki. Hazvo hazina basa. They got together and they said, what if we fought going forward? And then another group in Matebeleland. Aiwa, ane diki kanaye. Ndichazokuza ndoziya say. Another group from Matebeleland would do the exact same thing. When the liberation struggle took place, it did not discriminate by age, it did not discriminate by sex, it did not discriminate by tribe. There was no Urimu Ndevere, so you can't fight. There was no Urimu Shona, so you can't fight. There was no you're a male or you're female, so you can't fight. We got to 1980, General Chimombe lifting up the flag with the colors of Zimbabwe because young people decided we are going to work together, not because we agree with each other. But they got together because they understood we will not get the job done until we start working together. So can we all, as we live today, answer that question to say, I am willing to reach out to you, Maureen, and work with you so that we can get the job done. The job is one, it's called prosperity. We are all after prosperity, whatever our versions of it is. To me, prosperity might be to drive a nice car. To her, prosperity might be able to afford taking the kids to school, but we all call it prosperity. It's different versions, which only we can build. Friends, let us reimagine this country. Let us reimagine how this country works, how this country thinks. With that said, Edie Te, I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the different paths we have travailed, we have found each other, we have found ourselves. Acie Lumumba says, can we translate this to what we want? Is our hate louder than our dreams, than our vision, than our hopes? It is our duty to answer this question. Now we get into the question and answer session. Contributions, if you may, but ultimately we want to answer the generational question, also looking at 2018 elections, but indeed going beyond just 2018. So ladies and gentlemen, let's roll. Please note, we are online. We will also be taking questions online. So if you will, please send your question, pose your question, we will read it out. You just address your question to whichever panelist. We will go for a round of questions, and then they will take note of their questions, and we'll go for a round of answering. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much to all the panelists. My name is Linda Masara, aspiring MP for High Central, and you're in my constituency. Okay. My first question is to all the panelists. Does the 18 to 35 generation understand the value of elections and participating in national issues? The tragedy of this generation is lack of unity of purpose to deliver ourselves from economic quagmire and bondage from the geriatrics and junta running the country. How are you going to ensure that all of us don't go down into the dustbins of failure as a generation because of egocentrism and preferring freebies offered by those in political power? My second question goes to Maureen and Memory. You spoke highly about women emancipation, women empowerment, and women in politics. My question to you is about Thokozani Kupe. Because we should not just look at ourselves as young people, we are also evolving. And for me, on the 3rd of October 2018, I will no longer be a youth, I will be a woman. And we have to look at the issues, like what has been happening to Thokozani Kupe, it has happened to Maureen, it has happened to a lot of other women in other political parties. Where men are very misogynistic and they don't want women in power, what are we doing to ensure that the younger generation of women who want to get into political power will not face the same problem? As much as we might preach about generational consensus, I think it's also high time we start preaching about women's consensus. The third contribution, it's not a question, it's to Chimori. If we take politics as a means to survival only, or bonds or ekudya, I think we will clearly be missing the plot as the younger generation. Because we have got a lot of things that we need to correct that have been done the wrong way by the current crop of leaders that we have. And all that. I think we have to be the generation that brings forth ideas, the generation that will advocate for accountability, a generation that will demand accountability from leaders. But when we look for running into public office as a means, I'm sure that even the team apathy will not vote and will continue being team apathy, because they'll think that when they vote for people to go into public office, I think we have to reset that narrative and change the mindsets so as to ensure that the younger generation will go out in their numbers to vote for change, to vote for accountability, and to vote for a new crop of leaders that is concerned about sustainable human development and economic growth. Thank you.
Okay, Comrade Linda has said it well. The concept of kujya that was introduced by the fellow colleague, I think as a generation that proposition is quite problematic, because if we trace history, we will discover that it has only produced sycophants. It has produced slogan chanters, it has produced people that beat up other people simply because you get paid. It has produced bootlickers, people that would say particular things that are not relevant to framing policy, issues that are not relevant to producing organic loyalty to permanent national interests. But however, there is also something that I would also want to problematize, to say, while there is the logic around the issue of bringing the generation together to bring a new dispensation even into the parliament, I strongly feel like it is only a normative that has got this philosophical gravitas, but does not have the infrastructure to challenge the tenets or the features of a state, one of which is violence. And in the process, I've heard many colleagues going back to history to say there was the generation of Umkhonto weSizwe, where there was the generation of the Chitepos, that the infrastructure to challenge the state. And if we were to bring it to the present context, the Zimbabwean context, people are quick to say the junta, the junta, the junta. But do you have the infrastructure to confront the junta? So I'm saying, really, if this logic of generational consensus is supposed to reach a rational point, really it should have equal infrastructure to actually interface with the state. So I think that's my submission.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's try and keep our questions really short so that everyone has an opportunity to say something or to ask something. Please go ahead.
My question goes to my young brother, Acie Lumumba. I also remember seeing a Facebook post, MDC, and he seemed to be someone who was pro-Chamisa and the younger generation. But as he was winding up his presentation, he said what?
All right, thank you.
That's my question, yeah.
Okay. We will have the gentleman right at the back there.
Thank you. For me, I think it's a comment and probably a question to my sister Maureen. My comment is that the cracks at the core of the generational question for me, if you look into 2018, is not just the question of age. It is also to look at the question of the socio-economic status of young people in this country. The independence generation went on to eat until they started to eat independence itself. Because if you put up a law like Posa AIPA, you're literally saying the very essence of freedom is being eaten. You begin to corrode that which you fought for. So really, it is not about, and it's not even a question of the political party, really. It's a generation of those that have been excluded. That's why I'm also saying we must not be vacuous to say it is all inclusive of all people simply because they are. Yeah. No, not necessarily. It is inclusive of those that feel that the last 37 years has stolen their careers, has stolen their lives, has made them become perennial beggars in their own country. When you use that particular kind of lens, you then discover what these young people must do, because you meet them every day. Some of them are 5 O levels hanging precariously in the back of a combi. Some of them have all A levels and degrees, but they are fighting it out with machetes in Kweke Gaika mine for survival. When you have such kind of a country, it simply means that such a generation must reach a consensus to say, let's assume the reins of power and move forward. And in order to do that, you can only do that via an electrocentric approach, and it is by bargaining. So by pushing for Jamisa's candidates, you're also setting up a bargaining chip to say, we've given you this in return, essentially, for A, B, C, and D. And then my question to Maureen is, you were speaking so passionately about young women, but how do you view the participation of young women vis-a-vis our political system, which looks very much ready to segregate them either as they are saying, go to the PR, or no, wait for tomorrow, like for example in the case of Joanna, wait, no, you're PR rushing, wait, put on some brakes. So how do you just suppose that?
Thank you. Please, let's keep our questions and contributions short. I'll take 2 more questions and then we get into answers. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is, thank you very much, Chair. It's to all of you guys. I think my first question is that how do the young people find a common ground the same way the young people in 1979 did? So is there like a common ground of this ICT generation? Can we find a common ground as the young people in terms of the problems that we are facing, so that we can also do the same thing that the 1979 young people did? So then my contribution is that I think in all the political parties, there is minimum space for young people, particularly the young women. How do we kind of like get into those spaces to make sure that the young people, they have spaces there? Not kunzigati mirire nguva kuchikaita say yakwana. When is this time going to come? Then also, I think it's also important that we not, 2018 is the moment of change where we are seeing the chimrengas that you were talking about, Maureen. So now what we need to do is the young people to take part in what is happening in 2018 elections. Because I feel like as the young people, we are the finishers. Tisuva penderi, or in Devele they say umqedi. I don't know that if that's correct. So I feel as a young person, as a young woman, I've been beaten up, I've been arrested because of something that I've been fighting for. So where do we find this space of young people? Where do we find our space as young people? After participating, after being used by political parties. So I think with that, that's my submission.
Thank you. One more?
Thank you very much. I have 2 comments to make. One relates to the topic itself, the generational question. I'm not sure if this question was clearly defined in a collective way. That is my concern. Who is defining the generational question, and what is the interest behind that definition? Is this really collective in nature? That's the first question. The second one,
your question to sir?
To the panel. Yes.
Okay.
The second question relates to that general question in a manner in which the barriers and opportunities have to be identified. By and large, except for 1 or 2 panelists, most of the diagnosis of the problem appeared to be externalized. There was an attempt to self-introspect within the movement of the youth themselves. They appeared to do what I would call strategic deflection, whereby most of these problems have been apportioned to an outside player. Yes, it could be true that it can account to some of those problems to some extent, which is significant. But what is it that you are doing? What is it that you are missing within the youth movement itself? To look at the various levels of analysis, individual, group level, and societal level, within and across political movements. Yes, those are the 2 concepts.
Thank you. Now we're going to the answer session. We'll start from the end to the end. I'm sure our panelists got all the questions. I have 2 more questions here that came online from our Facebook page. These questions are directed to Acie Lumumba. One says, why did you leave ZANU-PF? And the other one says, how do you feel, Acie, when someone speaks to you in a language you don't understand, when you're able to speak a common language?
Okay, thank you very much. I think I didn't hear any question that was directed to me, but I was directed to the panel since I'm part of the panel. And firstly, I think I would also want to respond a bit on behalf of Lumumba. I think when he said EDF, he didn't finish. I think it was EDF Kaskaf. I think that was. Thank you. But I'll try to respond to primarily the question that was raised by my brother Richard Maureen around the way young people's movement organizing themselves to take power. And I would like to believe that the 21st century consequential question is that there are two worlds. On the other side are government gangs firing bullets, but on the other end are young people firing tweets. So me, I think it's a fundamental difference. So the way they organize themselves must not be primarily on issues that can then end up wrongly in terms of assumption. As Pride has rightly put it, the solution is electrocentric, mobilizing young people to go through an electoral process so that we garner victory in that particular process. And then it's not always easy, I think, to respond to, Dr. Mandara, because he's my lecturer since part one. He taught me political theory, introduced me to Franz Fanon and all these scholars. But because they've chosen to let him there and me here, I think I've been given at least the temporal mandate to respond to the question of how. I think also it's a comment on how then do we introspect as young people. And one of the greatest challenges of our society, if you look at how ZANU-PF structured the Zimase document and all those kind of things, where they were assumed to be national documents of nature, but they're not consultative in essence and in significance. So I find it as a more organic comment in terms of how do we organize ourselves as young people and introspect in terms of whatever program of action. But if I remember well, the South African democratic movement, the revolutionary movement in South Africa said, and it was not everyone, few individuals said in the ANC Youth Assembly, and they made key resolutions. I think there were 4. Number 1, anti-struggle. Number 2, international solidarity. Number 3, underground operation. Number 4, mass mobilization. Those 4 key resolutions informed the South African Democratic Revolutionary Project, but that it gave birth to what is now called the Freedom Charter. So it became a broad consultative process, but it was started by individuals, but who were conscious, talk of the Black consciousness movement. So for me, I think the fundamental pillars must be dealt with in terms of, do we agree at the level of ideological and philosophical persuasion, so they can then go back to our people and then have conversations. Because the consultative process is very important, but also it needs clarity of thought and what scholars call organic intellectual thought leadership, so that you inform a certain generation, so that you discover a mission and pursue it without fear or favor. So I think it's a comment, I appreciate it, and I think it must continue to inform our persuasion as young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, conversation informs decisions, and that's what we do best at Young People's Dialogue. We conversate. Maureen, please.
Oh, thank you. I think I'll start from where Ostalo's left. That Dr. Mandara's intervention is very critical, that we need to self-introspect. And as Ostalo says, we must do more to demonstrate our resilience. What I've noticed is that in the past 20 years, we have people at critical historical turns, mobilizing and going towards or forward one agenda, and then they just, demobilize. 2016, we had a very good movement going on, this flag and other people, and then it disseminated, and it accrues to a 1-minute impact. It's short-lived, and people just, demobilize before they reach the agenda. So for me, really, we need to do more to demonstrate our resilience, just in the same manner that people who went to fight the liberation war demonstrated their resilience. They knew that we will not stop until we attain, independence for Zimbabwe. And this is what is lacking in our generation. People will start talking about, prepaid water meters today. 2-3 days later, another issue emerges. They abandon this one and they go to the next issue. And for me, this is coming from a point where we have not defined the generational question, which is why this talk is very important. As I said at the beginning, the generational question for us is to complete the change. And what is the change? The change that people who went to the liberation war fought for is to democratize this country so that whatever those who are in the leadership do responds to the wishes and aspirations of the Zimbabwean people. And this is what we need to do as a generation. It's not about you going for a day without a meal. It's about those in the leadership not being able to deliver the wishes and aspirations of the Zimbabwean people. As soon as they manage to do that, we will be able to sort every other problem that we have. So for me, the resilience will come from having a consensus around what it is that we really want to achieve. And then Pride speaks to the issue of participation of young women, youth being sidelined. And I think it comes back to the issue that we're talking about, completing the change. And the change is about inclusive democratic governance. And when you talk about inclusive democratic governance, you talk about the representativity of government. When you talk about representativity of government, you take into account the fact that young people are 65% plus of the population. Therefore, it must represent or it must be represented or reflect in our governance structures. That way, we will know that our problems, our issues are fully represented. So for me, we need to narrow it down to what is the question. And the question is to complete the change of governance, or to complete the question of governance. And then there's an issue that was asked around, Thokozani Kupe and other women. And earlier on, I think it must have been Memory, who said it's not about age. It's about age, but it's not only about age. It is the same thing with the women's question. It's about women, but it's not only about women. When you talk about patriarchy, the mistake that many people make is to think that patriarchy is, just pro-women and anti-men. It's not that. Patriarchy is about fighting a system of dominance. The system that allows people who think that they are stronger than others to dominate the weaker. So for me, when a woman has an education, when a woman has a sufficient income, extra disposable income, and when a woman has a position of authority, it means that they're no longer vulnerable. So for us to craft our struggle around just the interests of that one woman, because they're already in a position where they are, where they are privileged, it is a travesty of justice. We are betraying, the rest of the women. For me, when women who are waking up every morning, having to look for alternative sources of energy because there's no electricity, having to look for clean water for their babies because children are dying from drinking dirty water, having to watch their babies die in hospitals because there's no medication, because electricity goes and your baby is in an incubator and they can't be supported anymore. When those women speak and say, you are the woman we forwarded, but we feel that you're not representing our aspirations. We also, as women, like you men, understand what democracy is about. So when we say we've put you forward, but you are not understanding what democracy is about, and we think that you must step down and we will put forth another woman, that is not discrimination against women. It is the wishes and aspirations of the majority, and it must be respected. What we've seen in the women's movement is that the women who benefited from the Beijing outcomes came back, monopolized the space, and said that, appointed themselves as patriarchal gatekeepers and said, until we say yes, you will not pass a certain post. And it's been very difficult for young women. When we started organizing, mobilizing, and agitating for #SheVotes 2018, we faced resistance from the older women. We faced resistance until a point where we said, no, we need an intergenerational talk, an intergenerational dialogue where we will tell you what we are about. That's when we started working with some of them. But what I understand is that the space is dominated by a narrative that is driven by women of privilege. And women of privilege believe that gender emancipation, gender upliftment, women's upliftment is about them and not about the ordinary woman. And we are putting a stop to that. So from today forth, when we speak and we say, Dr. Thokozani Kupe, you've served, but we feel that as women, you're no longer representing our interests. May you please step aside and we allow other people who we want to. Yes, it's same as she says, I'm sorry. As she says, Grace Mugabe, I've posed the question that if being a woman is the only criterion of value for someone to be in leadership, why did the women's movement not stand with Grace Mugabe when she was coming to those rallies and attacking people? It's because she was going against everything that we believe in. So it's no longer about just being a woman. No. What we're fighting for is to get to a place where we are gender blind, where we look at people's capabilities and abilities, despite the fact that they're male or female. That is what we're fighting for. We're not just fighting for a moment where we put women into power despite their shortcomings. So from that, I think. Thank you.
It's beyond being a woman. Dr. Mandara says there seems to be a deflection of responsibility. We keep saying they, who are they, and who are we in this equation? Can we answer that question? Who places them where they are? Who places you where you want to be? Is there some sort of protocol that we must follow, or there's something that we can do? So as we go forward, let's keep in mind that question. Acie,
since Maureen picked up from Ostalos, I'll pick up from Maureen. Ataura nyaya madzimai muona kuneti matambudziko awo eMDC batai wabata izvezvi wachaurayira pachawo language yandikutaura ite akomanaka. I was speaking English. Oh, there's white people. I'm sorry. The barely speaking people. Okay, that's fine. As Maureen has demonstrated to us that there is a lot of chaos in MDC, and she does hope that it gets resolved, and Nelson Chamisa takes over and Thokozani Kupe sits down. And I hope so too, by the way. For you, I hope so too. Let me respond to some of the questions, at least the ones that are still topical in my head. The issue of how do we then come together? The good doctor asked. So we're placing responsibility that it is somebody else's fault. Anyone who is in this room who has been involved in youth leadership knows how close to impossible it has been to get young people, especially young leaders, to get in the same room and move in the same direction. Of all the youth leaders I can see in this room, I see my brother Patson Jamara has just joined us. Every single leader I see in this room from every party, we have had many different efforts kudzimba dzevanhu, kumabhawa, kumahotera, kumapolitical party, dzekubvunzana kuti akomana, what can we do for us to work together? And this has proven to be very difficult, close to impossible. So herein lies my suggestion to how you answer that question. I belong to a political party called ZANU-PF. Maureen belongs to a political party. Ostalos does not belong to a political party. He speaks very good English, but party. But here's the problem. Hear me for a second. Here's where I think the solution is, rather. It is going to be very difficult, this thing we're trying to do. This thing we're trying to do, called rising up to the top and taking senior office, is going to be very, very difficult. Whatever political party you are in, whatever political orientation you belong to, rise in that political orientation. If we can't imagine, or we don't have what it takes to work together outside those structures, then perhaps within those structures, rise to the top. Do you know, if Joanna, who is in MDC, the one, Acie, which I hope you do, if she's able to take out Acie, and Joanna gets in as a young person, and Ostalos in his independence is able to take out the other independents at Atemba, and is able to rise up as the new, and Ostalos is the new, Ostalos in Kosara Moyo. Big English from Mars, but Chakubata. But Ostalos is able to become the new hero within the independent space. I rise up within ZANU-PF, become the new fair. When we get, as a generation, forgive my comedy, as a generation, when we get to a level where we are now at the highest level possible of those institutions, I reckon we can relate with each other better. You see the conversation happening here between us? It is harder for our parents than it is for us. So I am of the submission we get to the top of the pyramid by rising up the ranks. I want to see an agency, Gumbo. Good to see you, agency. Rise to the top of MDC, Indigenous Uku, Umsoro, to Sangana. So that's all the question that the doctor asked, how do you do it? My brother Courage Mafuki asked and said in the beginning, you said last year, and I wrote a post that give us Chamisa and we'll do the rest. Has my heart changed since then? I don't even know when the election date is. Maybe you do. I would really like to hear what both of them are saying. I am not so, Jonathan Moyo calls them idiots, to the extent that I don't want to hear what Chamisa is saying. I want to hear it. And I am listening to it. Bear in mind, I've been on a sabbatical for 3 months. I've just got back. And I'm busy at the moment, as you've noticed today. But I would like to hear what is Chamisa saying. The same way I hope everybody is trying to hear what is Chamisa saying, what is Mnangagwa saying. Let's not be fanatics, where we say just because it is Chamisa, just because it is Mnangagwa, I am voting. So yes, I am a member of ZANU-PF. I went, the question was, why did you go? Another question, why did I go back? I went back because that's where I'm from. It's my orientation. Ndochitendero changu. Kwandikakurira, zvinotoitwa zvikure zveikoko ndozvikure zvangu. Izvo zviyaziya ndozvekwangu, marikitiro ati mabhegi, mashandiro ati madziri. Yaka iyo ndoyatobarira imomo. So I am okay there. And I'm sure others are okay when they are. Because I look at what's happening in the opposition parties. And I'll give you a very stark example that I dare those on the panel to challenge. I look at what's happening with other political parties, MDC Alliance or MDC Ameno. And of the young people who are seated here, the ones who we see. So we saw Joanna, we saw Linda, we saw Cecilia, we see Agency, we see Maureen, my youth who are affiliated to MDC. Ask them how impossible it is for them to survive in MDC. And then you want me to live where I am comfortable. I have a car, I have a house, I have money. And then you want me to leave and go and join this. It cannot happen. These people are poor, I'm telling you. Yeah, that's why I left Ibatotics. Ice cream is important to buy when you go on a date. I can't be buying my children no ice cream. And now it's actually the hazard. Again, forgive the comedy, guys. I'm just trying to say these issues are in all parties. There is as hard an acceptance of young people in MDC, so I can imagine how hard it would even be for me. I am very comfortable where I am, but I am not an idiot. I am listening to what the other side has to say, and Pandrolo only defeated. I agree with, okay, our bullet train seems to be a better idea than a Mshika. Let us have a bullet train. I agree, I like bullet trains, I think well done. And I think finally Joanna spoke of the young people of 1979, and how the young people of 1979 got to their point of consensus. I think us too, we are the young people of the millennial generation, we will find our consensus. Sometimes I also think we're too hard on ourselves. Like, it didn't happen today, so why it didn't happen today? It's never going to happen. Look, we will eventually find ourselves. Mukusapota matime bora akafanana, mukuita mabawa akafanana, mukuya kuma platforms anengana yakafanana. We will eventually find ourselves. I think the quickest way to get there, Joanna, to 1970, the quickest way is if all young people, all of us, just came to some right.
Acie Lumumba, I have one more question for you here, coming from online. As in the word Tanga Nasi, conversation yakona Timba Mliswa. The person says, "Are you gay?"
So there's a very simple way of finding out, right? Like Temba Mliswa made an allegation towards me today. He says, I'm a gay gangster. Now, Temba must have a register of gay people in Zimbabwe, because I mean, you must have a register to be able to go to someone and say, yeah, you are gay, you're not gay. Because he seems to always know the people who he believes are gay. So I don't know where he gets this register from, but there's a very simple way. Temba has many wives and many daughters. Temba, bring one of either wife or daughter or yakaya. Then you see like a gangster, sure. Temba is crazy, you know. I think it's just Temba is just a little emotional at the moment because he's not. Again, ZANU-PF threw him out, and he's never really kind of found his way back since then. But look, my fight with Temba should not be a.
We are not here to this level of
yeah, but you can't stop someone else's question.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's a question that came through that he needed to answer, but at the end of the day, people also laugh, people carry on. Now we go on to our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, most of the questions, Maureen, Acie, and Ostalos tried to do justice to them. I'll just run through some of them. Linda, the 18 to 35 age group, that do they have an understanding and do they take elections seriously? I think we were part of a conversation where you actually also proposed that there is actually need. I think there has been a deliberate action in terms of just improving consciousness of the young people, not from 18, but at a very tender age, around issues of elections and history of our country. So I totally subscribe to that there is need. I think they might have understanding and consciousness of the importance of elections. I think statistics tell us that the recent ZEC elections, statistics tell us that 60% of the registered voters are women and young people. But we still need to do more in terms of just raising that consciousness. I think the obligation falls on all of us and other people. Then the second question came from Linda as well, and a bit from Joanna, around rallying together as women or young women. I think I totally subscribe to what Maureen says, that even if we are young people or we are women, we have to hold each other accountable. There has to be a set of principles and values that bind us. And the minute that is different, whether you're a young woman or you are a young person, which means we are not in the same camp. I think it subscribes to that. And I know you're hurting, and it has always been one of our long conversations in terms of, I think it's a challenge in how do we, as young people, Joanna also posed that we find common ground. I spent more than 10 years working for an institution that ideally, I think its mandate is consensus building. And I want to be very truthful in terms of consensus building is not going to happen overnight. Sometimes you have two people. And it's not you shouldn't be heartbroken in terms of just finding common ground. You need to continuously push, continuously reach out and listen. I think listen more to the diverging voices in terms of why are we not finding common ground for us to be able to find that common ground. But as I was listening, yes, of course, Dr. Mandara says we are pointing fingers and we are blaming. But as I was listening carefully, although we have, I said it before in my presentation, we might have different political homes, all of us here, but I think our aspirations, maybe if that is the common ground, is a better Zimbabwe. Is the prosperity that Acie was talking about. You might define it in different ways, but that's what we want. We might not want bullet trains, some of us, but some of us want that, something that is effective and efficient. But that's common ground. That is what we want as young people. So yes, I like academics and civil society people. When Pastor Ivan Mawarire emerged, the academics and civil society people, they like things to be written on ink and paper. And the civil society like log frames. So they were like, so what's the result? So where are we going? What are the objectives? What is the outcome? And sometimes it kills the organizing and movement building that we are talking about. It's a process. I think in 1979, the liberation struggle that Joanna was talking about, we were not talking about the log front, we were not talking about the results, so key result areas and all that. It was how we're going to progress, incremental gains as we move from this point to point B to point C. But they knew where they were going. They knew what they wanted. I think it's the same thing. And Dr. Mandara, yes, I totally agree. At some point, or I think all the time as young people, we should also hold ourselves to account. We should be accountable. We should self-introspect. We should look at what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong. And I totally take that. And the last question was, I think I've answered, it was about the violence and the gravitas that do have the capacity to challenge or to stand up against what is confronting us. I think I want to use an example of the late Dr. Richard Morgan Trangirai. I think even as you want to call it at the weakest, that he didn't command any army, any of the state apparatus that you're talking about. But in 2008, he was able to win elections without all of that. But with the consciousness, yes, some others might argue that I think recent events, people have been actually saying that he won elections, but I think it's about the consciousness and the zeal and the inspiration and the clarity that we might have as a people or young people that we can stand against that is in front of us and win. Thank you.
Thank you, Memory. I'm observing something very interesting here. It seems like we might, after all, be starting to have that consensus dialogue that we're all crying for. It seems like most of the panelists up here agree, together with the audience. Acie Lumumba says, let's listen to each other. Let's hear what each candidate is saying. And Memory goes on to say, in addition to that, let us be ready to be accountable for our actions, our hopes, our dreams, our desires. Now we will go to our last panelist to respond, and then we will go into the last round of questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Most of the questions have been addressed by the panelists, but there are certain issues that I just want to put into perspective and comment on. As youth, one thing that we should appreciate is after all the debate has been done, after all the talking has been done, there's one thing that's going to be outstanding, which is the action. We have a huge variance in terms of the population that's actually eligible to vote versus the population of youths that actually voted. But this general consensus issue is not an overnight event. What the youths of today have to do is to actually make sure that if you've registered to vote, proceed to go and vote. The youths that have not voted will actually see the importance of the actions that you would have taken. By actually going and participating in those elections, you're motivating one or two people. All the young candidates who are in this room, one thing that I would tell you is you're motivating a lot of young people around you. They may not come to you and say it, but you're silently motivating a lot of people. Right now, it doesn't seem taboo to be challenging a senior member like Jesse Majume in MTC, because everyone has seen a young person doing that. That's how we ultimately get to the generational consensus. It's not an overnight event, it's a process. And it's up to this generation to keep pushing that process, making sure that we get to where we desire. So that will be all.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll take only 3 questions, then we close up. It's almost time up. Gentlemen up there.
Thank you. My name is Maureen. First, I'll start with a comment and end with a question. I think looking at it from a all this is, at the end of the day, boils down to politics, whether it's the socio-economic status that we're saying as young people, but the political side, determines that particular side. So, in order for us, I think, as a generation to be able then to redefine some of these issues, we need to redefine how youth themselves within the political parties, within the political system, how we position ourselves. We know exactly who we are and what we are worth, because as much as we say we're the engines of political parties, but we're not behaving like those. It's very difficult, as I think Acie also was saying it, that it's very difficult within political parties for young people to have the freedom to speak or act and do the very same issues that we speak about within those particular circles. If you go and implement some of these things within political parties, so I think to some extent we need to find some truth within ourselves, because we cannot then continue if we cannot redefine ourselves within the parties and stake our prize and have that boldness within the parties or that we belong in. Be it MDC, it's the same issue. Be it in ZANU-PF, it's the same issue. If we cannot have that consensus then between the youth within the political structures themselves and then the youth within the civic society itself, having that broader vision as to saying that this is who we want to be within the next, creating that futuristic kind of picture where we as young people have that particular power then to be movers and shakers, real movers and shakers. First of all, I think we need to be honest within ourselves then, and not allow ourselves then, to some extent to say that this party abused me, you left and then you go back when you were saying Acie, because if you find yourself then going back to some extent within that kind of system, to me it brought back the picture of an abused, forgive me, I'll say a woman, where they go back to the husband who beats her up, who took up, but don't go, but those are not Jaira, So if you look closely within that relationship, there is one person who's being abused. The question is who? Secondly, then I think how then do we get to that point as young people is what we need to ask ourselves. We need to rise beyond. There is the political, gates that we have, where you are MDC, you are ZIP, you are this and that. But then we need to come up as a generation to a place where we are saying now, lo and behold, as much as I'm ZANU-PF, as much as I'm MDC, how then do we collectively, with the power of civic society, ensure that we become that powerhouse politically that can change the socio-economic part from the political perspective? Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will take only one more question, and I'll have producer.
Okay, thank you. I think listening to the conversation here, I think you get the feeling that you don't have a valueless conversation, because if you also listen to the language that is being used here, it celebrates violence, it celebrates riches, it it celebrates sex, you know, rape. You know, so we cannot have a generational consensus if, as young people in our various spaces, we do not have values that can be able to bind us, or we can have a conversation that is based on values. So until we are able to define the values that bind us, to say no to sexism, no to this, no to violence, then we're not able to bring ourselves together, because we'll continue celebrating these spaces. We go out there and complain about violence, but we come into this place and laugh at someone talking about, you know, I mean, talking about violence. And then the second thing is that as young people, we are not angry. We are very polite about our issues. If you go back to 1979, which was being referred to by Joanna, those young people were angry about change. We are laughing about it. We are joking about it. So we are not angry, and we are very polite about that change. This is why we continue to be told that we can't do this, we can't do that, because we are polite about it and we're not angry about it. And then lastly, there is no binding common question. Who is the enemy? What is the enemy? If we don't have a common enemy and a common question, we're not going to be able to bring ourselves together. And we don't need to be all in ZANU-PF or all in MDC to have a common question. Thank you.
Chairperson. Thank you for your submission.
Yes.
I would like to, unfortunately, say our time has come to an end. It's very interesting that we have the answers out here. If only we can just network after this dialogue and even beyond, and be able to connect with each other. Someone says, we have found each other. Have we found each other? You seem to say we haven't. But ladies and gentlemen, let's find each other immediately after this conversation, talk to each other, ask each other questions, and maybe we will come with one common answer which we will all seek an answer for. I would like to thank you all once again for being a part of this dialogue. It wouldn't have been without you. I would like to thank Dr. Mandaza for the venue, and I would like to thank our chairman and our board and the Young People's Dialogue. Last but not least, I would like to thank all of our panelists who have made great submissions, brought up questions and answers from the whole of Zimbabwe and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and good night.